Wow, 56-35, the Arizona Wildcats knock off Arizona State here at Arizona Stadium for the Territorial Cup to stay here in Tucson. That's Chris Cartman, son of a source. I'm Jared Cohen. The season is over, though, for both teams. Just 2 years ago, Chris, we were on this field, and they were playing for the Pac-12 South title. Before we talk grand scheme about these two teams, let's talk about this game and how Arizona just completely ran wild against ASU's defense.
Didn't expect that. If anything, you would have thought that Arizona would have had a lot of yards via the pass, right? Because ASU's last nationally in passing defense, not just last nationally, but historically bad. It's probably going to be the worst passing defense of all time once they add up the season totals. But Arizona didn't even throw a pass in the second half. 500 plus rushing yards is a record for Arizona, probably the most that ASU's ever given up. Had no ability to stop any of the run spread concepts. And then by the time the game was really going a bit downhill for ASU, it was just getting gashed even inside. Didn't expect that, but two bad football teams, so really anything like that could have been possible.
So what wasn't ASU doing offensively? They had a couple drives where it clicked, but for the most part, they really didn't get anything going, and they actually had a touchdown on defense, so they didn't really score on offense over 30 points.
Yeah, so prior to this game, ASU had run the ball very successfully in 3 of its 4 games against Arizona and Rich Rodriguez versus Todd Graham. ASU won those 3 games. The only game it didn't run the football well was that 2014 game when they were playing for the South Championship. This game, ASU had no ability to run the football. That's been a trend, really, in its 6-game losing streak. We've seen just an inability to win at the point of attack with ASU's offensive front. That continued. Really, the only success that they had, Jared, was in some of the Sparky package, but that's telegraphing that you're going to run the football. That's a bad sign. Manny Wilkins threw the ball accurately from a completion percentage standpoint, but too much scrambling, missed some open receivers, and then too much reliance on run replacements as opposed to being able to do more versatile things with your scheme. And so even though they did have some success, it wasn't nearly going to be enough to keep pace, especially given Wilkins' 2 turnovers that he had. One, he just dropped the football.
Arizona's season's over. Okay, they didn't make a bowl game. They win 3 games this season. I'm of the opinion you do not let go of Rich Rodriguez. I don't know who you can come in and turn it around at the pace that you would want them to turn it around. I think you give them at least another year, and if it's a lot like this, then maybe you look into that scenario. What is your thoughts about how U of A's season just kind of the bottom fell out with it, and it ended up being one of the worst they've had in quite some time?
Well, there's 2 really big issues here. First, on defense, the talent is just not there. And that ultimately falls on Rodriguez and his staff because they haven't added enough high-caliber Pac-12 players to be able to execute what they're trying to do. They've tended to take a lot of commitments early, thinking that they were going to out-evaluate other teams in the league, and that hasn't materialized. So that's a big problem. On offense, I wonder if their scheme is unsustainable because it's a run spread scheme. It puts the quarterback at risk to a lot of injuries and just very vulnerable. You have to have an elite player at that position to be able to execute it, and somebody with size to be able to withhold the physical toll. And that's why I think that style of offense is really diminishing in terms of how widely used it is in the league. And so those are 2 really significant problems.
And the injuries that they've had over the last couple of years, both the offense and defense, the amount of the defense on the field, the amount the plays, the offense that runs. So there might be something to that. ASU does not get bowl eligible with the loss tonight. Horrible losing streak to close out the season after they were 5-1, I believe, yeah. Right? So what's the future with this program? Todd Graham has to be feeling the heat a little bit as the season comes to a close.
They just totally fell off a cliff, Jared. Like you said, 5-1 to start the season, but they didn't beat a bowl eligible team with their 5 wins. As soon as they got into a meatier part of their schedule, they just really collapsed defensively for the 2nd year in a row. This is the worst passing defense nationally. They dialed back the pressure and weren't as blitz heavy this season, and that didn't really work. The problems really go back to 2012, 13, and 14 recruiting. They didn't add any high school defensive backs who are now playing for this team. That's Todd Graham's area of expertise because he's a defensive coach. I think there's a legitimate question as to whether Todd Graham's tenure should or should not be over at ASU at this juncture, because you had 2 back-to-back 10-win seasons. That was with players he largely didn't recruit outside of Demarius Randall and a couple other guys. Now you have really a team that's well below 500 over the last 2 years, especially when you look at the second half of 2015 and 2016. And the recruiting isn't going as well for them this year as they have in the past. So it's a legitimate question. The problem is you have a $14 million buyout. Maybe that gets negotiated. I don't know if they're going to fire Graham, but it's hard for me to argue against that at this stage of the process.
That's Chris Cartman. I'm Jared Cohen. Again, 56-35. Arizona takes the Territorial Cup for another year.